The 2000s was a golden era for gaming in every sense, and no matter what genre you love to play, there was always something that was unforgettable and gave us memories forever. But as a horror fan, I can't deny that the horror genre is always my #1 source of nostalgia, because I literally grew up playing horror games more than anything else. Being in 2025, it made me curious about what horror games I played 20 years back, and what scary experiences players went through decades ago during a generation with much fewer resources than today. And boy, I'm really glad I was curious, because 2005 was actually an insane year for horror games. And it saw a mix of psychological horror, action-oriented survival horror, and special experimental titles that basically caused a revolution in the entire genre as we know it today. Many games pushed the boundaries of storytelling, atmosphere, and gameplay mechanics, reaching a point where everyone in the gaming industry became invested in joining the competition and capitalizing on its substantial hype. So in this video, I decided to highlight the most memorable horror games of 2005, and I'm pretty sure many of you might not believe they are 20 years old already, especially when you realize that some are basically better than a lot of modern games. So without further ado, let's start. Most people today remember Bethesda with horror games such as The Evil Within or Doom, but 20 years ago, Bethesda was also responsible for a very cool horror game inspired by Call of Cthulhu. The game takes place in the 1920s, a timeline consistent with Lovecraft stories, and it follows the journey of Jack Walters, a private investigator with a crazy past. The narrative begins in Boston, but the majority of events happen in the fictional, decaying coastal town of Innsmouth, Massachusetts. Jack spent years in a mental institution and was released in 1922, shortly before he was hired to find a missing person, which led him to the eerie town of Innsmouth. The place is very isolated and has a sinister atmosphere, and Jack discovers that it's controlled by a cult-worshipping ancient, otherworldly beings known as the Deep Ones.
Evening. The name's Jack Walters. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss...
Miss will do for now. Welcome to Innsmouth, Mr. Walters.
One of the game's most unique features is its sanity mechanic, because as Jack witnesses horrifying events or encounters otherworldly beings, his sanity deteriorates, and you can see that.
Whoever's down there, you can rot.
This can lead to visual hallucinations, distorted perceptions, and even demise if his sanity reaches zero. The gameplay also combines elements of exploration, puzzle solving, and stealth with occasional combat sequences, because you must rely on hiding and strategy to survive most encounters with enemies, especially since resources like weapons and ammunition are very scarce. Let me know in the comments below if you remember this hidden gem, because I personally had insane nostalgia when I remembered it.
Jack Walters.
Hello, Mr. Walters. My name's Arthur Anderson. I need your help finding a missing person.
Come in. Come in. Damn it, Hernandez. Talk to me. What's going on? I'm not getting anything here. Marcus.
For many people, Cold Fear is remembered as a possible Resident Evil killer that sadly never had its chance and was buried under the shadows. The setting here is the Bering Sea, where a US Army helicopter is sent to investigate a mysterious Russian whaling ship, which is drifting in stormy waters. The protagonist, Tom Hansen, is sent to board the ship and uncover what happened to its crew, but he finds out that everyone has been transformed into grotesque, zombie-like creatures due to a parasitic infection. The twist is that the infection is linked to a secret biological experiment conducted by the Russian military. But the CIA also plays a very sinister role in this, leaving Tom with no options other than relying on himself.
My God.
Your playthrough mostly takes place in a claustrophobic and eerie environment, And the dynamic weather effects, such as rain and waves, add to the tension even more. Tom uses a variety of weapons, including pistols and machine guns, to fight off infected enemies, but as usual, ammunition is limited, and sometimes you have to use stealth or escape. It's really sad that this game was not popular and didn't achieve enough sales to become a series. But the reason behind this is that it was simply overshadowed by another huge game that I will mention later on.
Stay back! I'm with Anna. Help me.
This is not a hidden gem in any sense, because there's no way you can be a horror fan without hearing about the F.E.A.R series, even if you never played it yourself. The original game in 2005 was a starting point of a very terrifying story about a mysterious girl named Alma Wade, who is related to a series of supernatural events and a shadowy corporation. You play as Point Man, a genetically enhanced soldier with superhuman reflexes, and your mission is to discover Alma's origins, her connection to the corporation, and the horrors unleashed by their experiments. But this one is not similar to the previous two games on the list, because F.E.A.R is known for its dynamic tactical combat, meaning that this is an action experience with powerful psychological horror at the same time. There are so many weapons to use, and the enemies are known for their intelligence and adaptability, making encounters more unpredictable than you think. The experience is also rich with environmental storytelling and creepy sound design, because Alma Wade is a truly horrifying enemy, and her ghostly appearances, combined with her tragic backstory, put her among the most memorable antagonists in gaming. So if you were there when this game came out in 2005, let me know in the comments below.
Why do you think Carmen left you? You weren't enough of a player for her.
And if you don't do what Blackmore says, your precious little boys may not make it to junior high.
The Suffering is a game that came out of nowhere in 2004, but for some reason, everyone who played it felt like it was something special worthy of recognition, even though it wasn't very popular. But what's more ambiguous is the sequel. Even though this one is crazier and more interesting, the game picks up where the first installment left off, where Torque, a convicted criminal accused of killing his family, has escaped from prison after surviving the horrors of Carnate Island.
There is no escape.
However, his freedom is short-lived, as he is captured and taken to Baltimore, Maryland, where new horrors await. But he also must uncover the truth behind his family's tragic history. He can use a variety of weapons, including firearms, melee, and improvised tools. And he can even transform into a powerful monster when his rage meter is full, which is useful for dealing with tough enemies or escaping dangerous situations. This game is special because it has a similar psychological horror to Silent Hill, meaning its story explores themes of guilt, redemption, and the consequences of aggression, because Torque's past actions and moral choices play a significant role in the story.
What happened?
Colin, right there! Oh, Jesus, what did he do to her?
I would really go insane if this game got remade with modern visuals and mechanics. But sadly, the studio behind it was shut down a long time ago, making it a very nostalgic memory from the 2000s.
I came close to seeing inside you, too. Pretty wifey. But now she'll just have to be my one and only.
Doom is among the most popular franchises out there, but Doom 3 Resurrection of Evil was a very special installment in so many ways because it's the perfect expansion of an amazing game. This expansion is set 2 years after the events of Doom 3, and you play as a Marine stationed on Mars who discovers an ancient monument known as the Artifact of Hell. But the problem is that this piece of stone awakens a new wave of demonic forces.
As I promised, rise up, awaken.
Even though the original is nightmarish by itself, the expansion has more intense horror elements with new enemies, weapons, and a darker atmosphere, and it also doubles down on survival mechanics with truly terrifying encounters. The game frequently uses shadowy figures, whispers, and sudden enemy ambushes to keep you on high alert, and this time, ammunition and health are literally scarce, forcing you to be strategic instead of shooting demons left and right. So don't tell me in the comments that this is a purely action game, because anyone who played it knows very well that horror was always integrated into its core.
I'm getting too old for this. You gotta crouch to get under the tape. Come on, let's go. Body's rotten as we speak.
When I talk about Condemned Criminal Origins, I'm not talking about a normal good horror in the 2000s. I'm literally talking about one of the best horror games of all time for me and for many people.
God, why do they always have to kill in such maggot-infested dumps?
In my opinion, this is probably the best psychological horror game with full first-person action mechanics in the 2000s. And I would even say it's still good enough to beat many modern experiences. The story is complicated, so bear with me a little bit. The protagonist is an FBI agent called Ethan Thomas, and he is investigating a series of brutal murders in a poor area known for homelessness and crime. But the victims appear to be the latest targets of a notorious serial killer. Later on during his investigation, Ethan is suddenly assaulted and disarmed by a shadowy figure who seizes his own gun and kills 2 police officers before knocking him unconscious. The crazy part, however, is that this mysterious person used Ethan's gun to kill those officers, and Ethan found himself framed for committing the killings. This forced him to go on the run because he must clear his name while tracking down a sadistic serial killer known as Serial Killer X, who is literally a murderer who hunts and eliminates other serial killers, which is an insane concept, to be honest. When Ethan delves deeper, he encounters many violent criminals, eerie supernatural occurrences, and disturbing hallucinations that challenge his perception of reality. This is not an exaggeration because Ethan's hallucinations are not random, and sometimes they actually represent visions of an event that might happen in the near future, or someone sinister who's close to your location. But make no mistake, even though the psychological horror here is insanely powerful, action and combat are equally engaging and essential. Weapons here are more diverse than ever. Pipes, crowbars, wooden planks, sledgehammers, or fire axes. They're all available, and you can use them based on the situation you're facing. But keep in mind, ammunition is not everywhere, so you have to be careful and know when to use what. It's really a very rich and intriguing experience with a strong narrative and surprisingly a perfect balance between action and psychological horror. 2005 gamers were definitely lucky to have this one in their gaming library back then. And by the way, in case you didn't know, this game is literally the sister of F.E.A.R, and both franchises were created by Warner Brothers in 2005 to serve a similar audience.
Government conspiracies, secret weapon testing, aliens. I didn't believe any of it. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to encounter. This is my story.
Area 51 is a game from ancient history that I'm pretty sure most of you forgot existed, even though the people behind it are the same publisher behind the Suffering game. The story is probably clear for you from the name. because here you go through the journey of Ethan Cole, a soldier sent into Area 51 to investigate a mysterious viral outbreak. And I think you know very well what Area 51 is. However, the mission quickly turns into a nightmare when Ethan and his team start to understand the horrifying truth behind the secret military base, which is similar to the theories in real life. But that's not all, because Ethan himself gets infected with a virus, and he somehow gains alien-like powers, allowing him to morph into a powerful creature, which confirms that authorities have been working on very sinister stuff, and they were also covering up alien activity for decades. As a result, Ethan must fight mutated soldiers, alien creatures, and even his former teammates while trying to solve the mystery of Area 51, which means you can expect a lot of combat, puzzles, and a deep investigation. This is an experience made for people who are fans of X-Files style conspiracy theories. And to be honest, I feel like we don't get this type of sophisticated alien horror these days. Alien stories are truly among the most underutilized in the industry, and they never get the same attention as zombies.
Cole, take a look at this. Switch to your scanner and get a reading off that arm. Later on, you can go through your data bank and see the information in more detail.
To be honest, this game was released in early 2006, but I'm going to add it to the list because it's in the same timeline, and it also deserves to be remembered. First of all, let me remind you that Siren is not an average horror game by any means. In fact, it's basically the closest competitor to Resident Evil and Silent Hill back in the day. This is a sequel, and it takes place on Yamijima Island, an abandoned place with a dark past since 1976, when a mysterious disaster wiped out all the inhabitants, and the island was left deserted like a wasteland. 30 years later, a group of people arrives to explore the area. But little do they know, the island is not really empty, and it is full of Shibito and Yamibito, which are zombie-like creatures and shadowy figures with unknown motives. There are multiple playable characters across the journey, each with their own perspective, creating a non-linear narrative that slowly reveals the island's haunted history. There's also some cool mechanics like sight-jacking, which allows you to see through the eyes of enemies and helps you in avoiding threats or planning movements in stealth sections. But as I said in previous videos, the Shibito may look like zombies, but don't be fooled. They are much smarter and have a personality that drives their actions, meaning they can understand your movements if you don't be careful. There's a decent amount of combat in the game, but stealth and psychological horror are very common as well. Because in case you don't know, Siren was made by the same guy behind the first Silent Hill game, Keiichiro Toyama, and he was actually inspired by real-life events in the 1930s, when a 21-year-old called Mutsuo Toi committed a massacre and killed 30 people in Tsuyama village, which is literally half of its entire population. This led to the disappearance of Tsuyama village, and it was merged with another city after it became the site of Japan's biggest killing spree in modern history. According to his diary, Mutsuo Toi did it because of people's behavior against him after his lung disease, when most of them started avoiding him, and he felt like he had no chance of getting married or having friends. This tragic event shaped Keiichiro's inspiration to create a horrifying abandoned village, but the catch is that this time, their souls never really left. Sadly, the Siren series is not a thing anymore, and I don't know if we'll ever see it back with a new release. But for many people, it's still the best combination of Resident Evil and Silent Hill.
freezing. So cold all of a sudden. Must be my imagination. Sorry it took so long.
When you hear the term 2005, there's no freaking way you can associate it with anything more than the one and only Resident Evil 4, especially since it was a revolution that changed gaming as we know it forever. The story is about Leon S. Kennedy, a US agent and former Raccoon City police officer, who is sent on a mission to rescue Ashley Graham, the president's daughter, after she was kidnapped. His search takes him to a rural village in Spain, where he encounters the Los Illuminados, which is a sinister cult responsible for the abduction and many other messed up stuff.
When the eggs hatch, you will become my puppets. Involuntarily, you'll do as I say. I'll have total control over your minds.
Eventually, he finds out that they use a parasitic organism called Las Plagas to control their followers, including villagers, monstrous creatures, and even former allies. But even with the story aside, what made this game special was the insane gameplay mechanics that were literally ahead of their time. Unless you were living under a rock, you probably know that the camera perspective you're seeing right now on the screen wasn't really a thing before Resident Evil 4 saw the light. In other words, the over-the-shoulder camera view that you enjoyed in Dead Space, Alan Wake, Silent Hill 2 Remake, and The Evil Within was all started by the ideas of Shinji Mikami, the creator of Resident Evil 4. This is why this specific installment was also remembered as the turning point in making the franchise focus more on action elements and dynamic combat, which led to making it more popular even among people who are not fans of horror. This explains why there are so many weapons here, including shotguns and rocket launchers, and their impact feels very satisfying. And by the way, this is also the game that introduced a new type of precision aiming in third-person shooters, allowing you to target specific body parts, and this system became the foundation for games like Gears of War. Resident Evil 4 was simply a proof that action and horror could coexist without losing suspense, by balancing intense firefights with eerie moments, which inspired other horror franchises in the following years.
Ashley! Where are ya?
Leon!
This is all I have for today regarding 2005 as a historic year in horror gaming. But before I end this video, I want to highlight one last honorable mention, which is the one and only Evil Dead Regeneration. This is arguably the best Evil Dead game in history, and it's more unique than any of its predecessors in every way, even the narrative. But keep in mind, this is not an experience about deep stories or events. It's mostly about killing zombies using all kinds of weapons, but there's also humor and surprises along the way. There are also puzzles that you need to solve and missions to complete. But no matter how stressful things get, the game remains fun from start to finish.
Let's go.
So in summary guys, the 2000s was really a special era for horror gaming, and it basically shaped most of the current gaming mechanics that we enjoy and love. I wanted the list to be about 2005 games specifically because it's literally crazy. They're all 20 years old now, and we're 2 decades older since we played them back in the day. This is weird when you think about it, because it reminds us of a time when we were playing games with less stress, fewer responsibilities, and fewer bills to pay, and we weren't even engaged in social media as we are today. Even politics were way less intense back then. Anyway, give me a like if you enjoyed the video, and join the channel as a member if you want to support us. See you next time.
Hey, wait, what are you...